Hey, what's up, comic book culture? It's your boy, CBM, in the house and the place to be. And when you're rocking with me, you need one mic and one MC and a few Marvel Cosmic keys. Ooh, did I just spit that? I really like the way that was sounding. Cosmic Key Comics, because that's exactly what I got here for you today. Some Marvel Cosmic Key Comics. I've got my Adam Warlock top 10 comic books that you should not only have in your collection, but you should invest in having them CGC graded. So before we get this video popping off, let's click like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and Hulk smash that notification bell, because I will be making comic book content on a daily, and I don't want you to miss out on a thing. With that all said, let's talk comic books, because it's clobbering time. Okay, I just want to say that Adam Warlock is my second favorite character of all time. Second only to none other than the Silver Surfer. I mean, I absolutely love those two. They are neck and neck. The Silver Surfer beats him out slightly though. I mean, which kid from the 90s doesn't love Adam Warlock? He was absolutely epic. He was the 90s. To me, Adam Warlock was the most important character of the 90s. Okay, we are at the halfway point of this Adam Warlock comic book top 10 list. I would like to mention, while The Power of Warlock issue 1 was the first ongoing solo series of Adam Warlock, and while Strange Tales was an ongoing story featuring Adam Warlock in issue 178 and 179, which featured the first appearance of Magus, I would like to give an honorable mention to Incredible Hulk issue 178. Which was the second rebirth of Adam Warlock and the second time he re-emerged from the cocoon. I really wish I had that issue of the Incredible Hulk, that comic book, a part of this collection, graded and encapsulated and slabbed up. But for whatever reason, when I was collecting these comics, I don't know why, I didn't get issue 178 graded and slabbed up. And boy, I wish I did. Now, I do have Incredible Hulk issue 178 raw, but I do wish I also had it a part of this collection, graded and slabbed up. But at the time, I was like, how many origins and rebirths of Adam Warlock can I have in this video? And it just didn't quite make the cut. But again, I want to give an honorable mention to Incredible Hulk issue 178. It's the rebirth of Adam Warlock, and it's an epic story as Adam Warlock encounters the Incredible Hulk. So, let's move on to the top 5. The big guns. The heavyweights, the home run hitters. Time to move on from the key issues to the grails. Because moving on forward, you ain't gonna find any of these books any cheaper than $300. So, coming in at number 5 is my copy of Marvel Premiere Issue 1, CGC graded 6.0 with white pages, published in April of 1972. Story by Roy Thomas, cover and interior artwork by Gil Keynes and Dan Atkins. This is another book where the black is really dark and deep. And again, they always use a lot of yellow and reds when it comes to Adam Warlock. So the colors really stand out. They're really popping and vibrant. I always hunt and look for books that present better than they grade. I always look to make sure that the books I pick have a perfect and flawless looking spine. I don't want any kind of major stress mark or a ton of tick marks riddling that spine up and down the edge. Unfortunately for me, this book, it does have one, what I would call like pretty bad to me, stress mark. I really don't like it. It breaks the color. I just don't find it aesthetically pleasing to the eye. I can live with it for now because it's a 6.0 with white pages, and to me, having white pages with these Key and Grail Adam Warlock comics is really important to me. I do plan on upgrading this comic book one day to at least a 7.5. That's my goal, to upgrade this to at least a 7.5 eventually. And I'll probably still keep this in the collection because that's how good this book truly does look. It's just that this stress mark really bothers me. And before I even bother having to check what Key Collector says is the importance of this comic book, when I was a kid, what I found important about this comic book, what I fell in love with at first sight when I first seen this comic book, again, is the powerful image of Adam Warlock. And there he is in between two of the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe, the Incredible Hulk and the Mighty Thor. And who's standing amongst them in the middle? Adam Warlock. I mean, you just gotta love that cover and that imagery. Adam Warlock standing amongst the two most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe. That just right there spells power and how powerful he was. So I just fell in love with that cover when I first seen it as a kid. And I was like, I have to have it. And like I said before, I have these copies graded and I have them raw and then some. Double and triple copies. When it came to Adam Warlock, it was big or go home. Not only am I betting on Adam Warlock, but I am doubling down on Adam Warlock. I'm betting on black and I'm betting on red. I'm covering all the spreads. And Marvel Premiere Issue 1 featuring the power of Warlock is no exception. So let's check out what Key Collector says is significant about this key grail. Okay, again, it's the rebirth of him, renamed Warlock by the High Evolutionary. It's also the debut of Warlock's costume, including an unnamed emerald, later revealed to be the Soul Infinity Stone. And that's also what it says on the CGC label. It's the first appearance of him as Adam Warlock, first appearance of the Soul Gem. It also has a Hulk, Thor, and Fantastic Four appearance in flashback form. Not only is it the first solo appearance of Adam Warlock and another rebirth and another retell of his origin story, it is the first time that he is officially called Adam Warlock as he makes the transition from previously being known as him. So another great comic book to have in your collection. And at a 6.0, you're going to have to pay at least $200 to $250. Let's move on to my number 4 book. And coming in at number 4 is my copy of Thor issue 166. CGC graded off-white to white pages. It was published in July of 1969. Story by Stan Lee, and the cover and interior artwork by none other than Jack King Kirby. And boy, do I love this front cover. The artwork is just amazing. I love this depiction of Adam Warlock and Thor battling each other. It just looks like a massive, huge battle that's taking place on this front cover. And I know what some of you are thinking, like, hey, you only have a mid-grade copy. But this mid-grade copy is absolutely perfect. I can't see a thing wrong with it. The colors are really popping and vibrant. The white is really white. And the spine, I don't have to say it for every single issue. It is flawless and perfect. And there is not one stress or tick mark on it. And I don't know how this book only graded a 5.0. I'm sure if I cracked it out and resubmitted, it would probably grade a 7.0 to a 7.5. Especially if I could book cleaned and pressed. I don't see a single thing wrong with it. There's no foxing on it. There's no mold on it. It's not a dirty gray to off-white looking cover. Like I said, the whites are really white and the book is really crispy and sharp. And I love this front cover as Adam Warlock, who back then only known as him, is battling Thor, going toe-to-toe, holding his own, as Thor is even in God Berserker mode and still can't fully take out Adam Warlock. I mean, he really gave Thor a run for his money. I really can't say who won or lost this battle, or if it was a tie. But at the very least, I know he gave Thor a run for his money, if not practically defeating him. And let's see what CGC has to say. It is the second full appearance of him, later to be known as Warlock. And it covers Thor versus him. Let's see if Key Collector has more information on this book. Yep, it says exactly the same thing as the CGC label, which is great. Second full appearance of him, classic battle of Thor versus him. And indeed, it is a classic battle of Thor versus him. And look how powerful that image looks. It looks like they're moving the planet as the earth shakes and quakes beneath their feet. I just love that image. Alright, let's move on to the next book. Okay, so we're finally down to the top 3. And coming in at number 3 is the true beginnings to this character. The true original origin story of him. It all begins and starts with the Fantastic Four, issue 66. I have a CGC graded 6.5. It has off-white pages. It was published in September of 1967. Story written, of course, by none other than Stan Lee. It's another one of his great creations. Cover and interior artwork by none other, of course, than Jack King Kirby. And I just love having this comic book in my collection. I can't express how much I love having this comic book in my collection. It is a comic book that I've dreamt of having since I was a kid. And I remember as a kid seeing this book for like $50, $80. I must have been only like maybe 8, 9, and thinking that that was just way too much to spend on a comic book. How could I ever spend that much money on a comic book? How could I ever get that much money to spend on a comic book? And then like around 12 years old, I remember the book was like $80 to $100. And I definitely wasn't going to cough up $100 for a comic book. I mean, my dad wouldn't even allow me to spend $200 on a pair of Jordans back then, much less a Hondo on a comic book. Talk about expensive paper. That was a lot of money for back in like the 80s and 90s for a comic book. So I can't explain how happy I am to finally have this in my comic book collection, especially at a CGC 6.5 with off-white pages. I love this cover art by Jack King Kirby. It's just beautiful. I mean, I love the thing. And the book is in pristine condition. Again, I'm always shooting for books that present better than they grade, and this is just another example of it. And that's why if I ever resell these books in the future, I'm going to demand top dollar for all of them. But I'm never going to resell any of these. These are all going in the PC, either to be buried with me or to pass on to my son one day. Most likely to pass on to my son one day. It's just another gorgeous cover and another gorgeous copy. Let's see what Key Collector has to say about Fantastic Four issue 66. It is the origin of him, later known as Adam Warlock. It's the first appearance of Carlo Zolta, a member of the Enclave, whose story is reconnected to Marvel Comics issue 1, 1939. Wow, that's a real back-in-the-day connection that they reached for. But for those of you who don't know, the Enclave is the evil secret society of scientists who create Adam Warlock to be the perfect human being. And that's basically his origin story in a nutshell. Before I move on to my final 2 books, I would like you, the comic book culture, to try to guess in the comment section down below, what do you think on my number 2 and my number 1 book? You should be able to guess. There's only 2 obvious books left, but I want to see if you can guess what order I'm going to put these last 2 books in. Because depending on how you view and judge cameos versus first full appearances is going to determine if you agree or disagree with my final 2 top picks. With that all said, coming in at number 2 is my copy of Thor issue 165. It's a CGC graded 6.5 with off-white to white pages. It was published in June of 1969. Story, of course, by Stan Lee. Cover art and interior art by, again, Jack King Kirby. I mean, these are just classic books. Again, I was shooting for the moon when it came to these books. I made sure to get a book that presented much higher than it graded, and this book, to me, presents like an 8.5. I'm not even going to talk about how perfect and flawless this book looks. I'll just let the camera do the talking. You can see for yourself how good it looks. And again, it's another book that I've always wanted as a kid that was always way too much for me. And back then, my pockets weren't deep enough to afford this book. But now as an adult, I made sure to get this book. And I cannot explain how satisfying and how good it felt to have the first full appearance of him, later known to become my second favorite character of all time, Adam Warlock. I always wanted this comic book. I always wanted to have Thor issue 165 in my collection. I remember the first time seeing this cover as a kid, and I was like, who is that guy? When I first heard the name Space Jesus, I was like, that describes Adam Warlock perfectly. And that's what he was. And that's what he looked like, and that's how he came off in this cover. And I was just like, I have to know who is this powerful entity over there just shining light down upon Thor like he was nothing, ready to like take him down. So yeah, another comic book that I can't explain how happy and excited I am to finally have this in my collection and how much I love it. And just the image of Adam Warlock, back then known as him, ready to take down the mighty Thor, the god of thunder, God versus perfect human specimens. It's just an amazing image. And finally, down to number 1. I can't wait to read the comments down below and see how many of you guessed my number 1 pick correctly. As some of you might have guessed, not only am I a bit of a completist, but I am also a cameo person. And when I was growing up, I was always taught the first appearance of a character is the first appearance of a character. It doesn't matter if he talks in the final page or in the final panel. It doesn't matter if he says 1 word or if he says 30 words. A first appearance was a first appearance. There was no cameo appearance and then later on a first full appearance. Back in my day, whatever was the character's first appearance was also known as his first full appearance. There was none of this BS. There was no debate about it. So coming in at number 1, congratulations if you guessed it right, is my copy of the Fantastic Four issue 67. I'm proud to say that this Grail copy of mine is a CGC graded 6.5 with off-white to white pages. It was published in October of 1967. And just look how crispy and sharp this book looks. The colors are again really popping and the white on this book is really, really white. It's another book that presents higher than it grades. The corners are really sharp. None of the corners are blunted or dull. There's no rippling or waves in the book. It seems to lay really, really flat. The spine is free of any stress mark or tick marks whatsoever, which is what I find most important when purchasing any sort of key or Grail comic book from the Silver and Bronze Age. You want to stay away from color breaks. They're just the most unappealing defect in a comic book, in my opinion. That's the one defect that I must stay away from at all costs in any comic book that I purchase. And as you can see, even where the Marvel publishing label is, you can see there's not one bit of color break on that whole cover. It's just absolutely beautiful and flawless and perfect. And when purchasing this book, I was really happy that I was able to avoid a cover that had an off-white to cream look on it, that had that dirty grayish look to it, or that tanning from age on it. I wanted to avoid all of that nastiness at all costs. I wanted the book to look as white as possible, the way it originally presented when it was first printed way back in 1967. I wanted it as white as possible. The only bad thing I could say about this book is that it is a bit off-centered. Some of the back poured into the front of the cover, but it really doesn't matter because it had a white front and a white back cover. So it really doesn't matter that it was off-centered. Again, it's another book that I've always wanted since I was a kid. And back when I was a kid, this must have been like, $300 book, $500 book, even way back then. And I definitely couldn't afford this book as a kid, as a child or a teenager. And I always had plans to obtain this book, but even in my 20s and early 30s, I found it way too expensive to pull the trigger on it. It's not until recently, this year, that I decided to finally bite the bullet and start purchasing these Grail and Key issues of Adam Warlock before they further went up in value. So I guess you could say I kind of got bit by the FOMO bug. And I wasn't going to take the chance that people realize that Adam Warlock is as epic as I thought he's been for the last 20, 30 years. I didn't want to take the chance that other people fell in love with Adam Warlock as much as I've loved them throughout the years. And if people did realize how epic Adam Warlock was, that was going to hike up the demand for these type of books, and it was going to hike up the price. And I didn't want to take the chance of these books going up any further in value where they were going to be completely out of reach for me and not cost effective for me to purchase. So I'm just glad I was able to obtain these books while they were still at a decent price. Real quick, I paid $375 for Thor 165. That included shipping and tax, and I paid $200 for Fantastic Four issue 67, CGC graded 6.5. And I think at $200 with shipping and tax included, I pulled off another robbery and I got bang for my buck. So I can't explain how glad I am to finally have this comic book in my Adam Warlock collection. And I can't explain how happy I am to finally have these top 10 Adam Warlock. As you can see from this top 10, he had a lot of origin stories, a lot of rebirths, which make it tricky for collectors to determine which books they should get in their collection when it comes to speculating on Adam Warlock key issues and grails. I covered all my bases and I secured the bag when it came to Adam Warlock. So let's take one final look at this Grail comic book. My Fantastic Four issue 67, the origin of him. And I just find the origin story just as important as what most people consider his first full appearance in Thor issue 165. But to me, the origin story of Adam Warlock is just far too important for me to ignore as far as comic book history. To me, this is the beginning and the start of it all, of how the Enclave created a perfect human specimen. And out of the cocoon appears this golden figure known as Hem, later on to become Adam Warlock. I just love this cover. Can't get enough of that image of that cocoon opening up. Well, guys, that was my top 10 Adam Warlock comic books that not only do I think you should have in your comic book collection, but if you do have these books in your comic book collection, I think you should invest in getting them CGC graded, because I think Adam Warlock is a great long-term investment for the future. You will not regret having these comic books in your collection CGC graded for the long term. You are going to be so glad to have these books in the future. Peace out, comic culture, and keep it comics.